Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green 19 podcast. The offseason is over. The gang is back together. I am Dominique Yates. I'm joined by Ryan Wood and Tom Silverstein. Guys, a long time no see. First off, I can start with you, Ryan. Just how was the summer? How was your time off?
We back, man. This 5 weeks between mini camp and training camp, I swear, goes faster and faster every single year. But it was good. We were in very similar necks of the woods, Dominique. I was down for a week with my folks and my kids in southern Indiana. They have a retirement lake home down there, so that'll be neat. And during that time, this upcoming preseason schedule works out quite favorably for me on a personal level because going down to Indianapolis, my father's going to be able to take my kids to their first Packers game against the Colts. So that'll be interesting. Made those plans, but happy to be back. Happy to have football. Spoon, how was your summer vacation? Those quick 5 weeks.
Good. Got chance to relax, I would say, and saw a lot of baseball and spent a week away from home. Other than that, it was pretty much the way I have it all set up. So all good.
How's the team doing, Spoon? How's the team?
It was a little bit of a rough year.
Was that because of managing? Was the managing on point?
Probably not. No. Probably that was our weak spot. But I won't take all the blame. I got to put some of it on someone else.
I know it's Spoon. It looks like you got some sun. It looks like you were out there and a lot of good baseball. I'm not gonna lie, I did get on social media during this offseason. I didn't see much Packers news, but I did have some people asking about your job security. So I'm just gonna put that out there. I'm just gonna
the media was all over me this year, so I tried to deflect.
A lot of hit pieces, but let's jump into just getting ready for the Packers, and because like you said, the offseason is over. The players are starting to report. They're back in Green Bay. Training camp starts on Wednesday, so we wanted to kind of get together and talk before training camp is underway, and we can really start with news that happened just days before camp begins, and it was a huge news for Zack Tom, signing a 4-year, $88 million extension, $30.2 million signing bonus, which is a record, and it was a big get for him. And I can just start with both of you guys and kind of get your overall thoughts on it, because obviously throughout this offseason and beyond, we've kind of talked about some of the linemen and asked about, you could say, their futures with the Packers. But Zack Tom was kind of a guy that it didn't seem like there was much argument or dispute in saying like the Packers needed to lock this guy down. So Spoon, I'll start with you. Just, what were your thoughts on this deal and just everything for the Packers keeping Zack Tom?
I think it was, sometimes there's winners, sometimes there's losers in contract deals, but more and more it's kind of a win-win with these long-term deals. And I think it was probably a win-win for both sides. Zack Tom could have rolled the dice and gone into free agency next year and, quite possibly gotten a whole lot more money, gotten a lot more guaranteed money than he got. But when someone throws down $30 million in front of you and says, this is your signing bonus, it's hard to turn something like that down. It's a lot of security, and he gets it. And so no matter what happens this year, he's, guaranteed $30 million. So for him, I think, given he was going into the last year of his contract at $3.4 million, this was probably a pretty good investment on his part. For the Packers, it's a good investment as well. They get him for this year plus 4 more. And as long as he doesn't have a David Bakhtiari type catastrophic injury, it's likely they have him they have their right tackle till he's 30 years old. So from the Packers standpoint, $30 million to lock a guy down for 5 years is pretty reasonable. And, the 88 million will be surpassed, quickly, within a year, someone will be making far more than that at right tackle. And we might be talking about Zack Tom wanting a renegotiate, but for right now, they locked down the third, really the three main pegs in their offensive line, which is they've got Aaron Banks, which they signed for $77 million in the offseason. And then Elton Jenkins is still under contract for 2 years, and now Tom's under contract for 5 years. So now they can just say, all right, fill the next two spots and, let everybody compete for those next two spots. And they certainly have a lot of guys to do that.
Ryan, just same thing. What were your thoughts when you heard the news on Zack Tom?
Well, start with where Spoon left off. All three of those guys, Aaron Banks, Elton Jenkins, and now Zack Tom, are top 5 paid players at their positions on the offensive line. So this is an offensive line that the Packers have thrown a ton of money at. And that should mean only good things for the two most important players in this offense, which are Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs. I mean, that power run game, they're better fit for that with the size that they've added and moving Elton Jenkins to center, having Aaron Banks now at left guard. They're better fit for protection now that's shoring up Zack Tom on your right tackle spot. So I imagine there's two very happy superstars in the Packers backfield because of this. But as Spoon referred to, this is the makings of a team-friendly deal. Not that it's not friendly to Zack Tom too, but how do you get a guy who's set to make mega bucks on the open market? How do you get him to settle before? You throw a lot of upfront money at him. It's for any player. It's difficult to say no to a hefty signing bonus knowing you're getting that money right now. It's difficult for anyone in any corporation. You throw a lot of money at someone, they're going to be more likely to say, yeah, okay. So that's what the Packers did. And for Zack Tom, he still gets to be a top 5 paid right tackle. And that is something that last offseason, the past couple years, we've said, okay, well, with all these rumblings of could he be a Hall of Fame center? Could he move inside and be even better? It's like, well, he's going to have, whether he plays right tackle or not, he's going to have to be paid right tackle money because he's shown himself to be one of the best right tackles in the NFL. So you can move him to a different position, but you can't pay him less because this is what he's established his market value worth. And that's ultimately what he ended up getting with that hefty signing bonus. So, yeah, I mean, this offensive line should have very high expectations, which should end up being the foundation for this offense. Should be good for all players involved.
This might be a bit of a loaded question, and I'll start with you, Spoon. As far as now that you see the Zack Tom deal done, I guess what are your thoughts on some of the other contracts for some of these guys moving forward? Maybe it is you talked about Elton Jenkins, or maybe like the Devontae Wyatts of the world, and some of these other guys. You can say coming up on those 5th-year options and beyond. I guess, what do you kind of make on some of these other contracts? Do you think maybe more could get done, or is it kind of too early to tell, or not really, too sure about it?
Well, Zack Tom was a priority. I think they showed that it was a priority by getting it done before the start of training camp. And, so they avoided any kind of conflict where he might do a hold-in or, decide he's not going on the field till he gets a new deal. They still got to resolve whatever is bothering Elton Jenkins. I don't know what Elton Jenkins wants done to his deal. It's not good precedent to redo deals in the middle of them. The Packers don't like to do that. So we'll see what happens with him when he gets there. I don't know if they're trying to do anything with him or not. So from there, it's all depends on who's willing to bite, who's willing to accept what you're offering. And so, Tom, they probably had to keep going up and up. Now they probably have a price for Devontae Wyatt, and they probably have a price for Quay Walker, both of whom are going into the final year of their contracts. And, they'll probably keep talking as long as it takes. It's how much, does Devontae Wyatt want to get a deal done before the start of the regular season so that he gets out of the injury question. That'll be the question that he faces. And then the Packers, conversely, are, well, how much do we offer? What are we willing to pay to keep him? So that's kind of what we'll see. I think all of it's up in the air, but I could see them doing one or two more deals before the season's over.
Ryan, do you have anything that you're kind of curious about as far as you say the contract world and what's next?
Well, I think the next big question on the offensive line is Rasheed Walker. If he wins this battle, which I don't know how much of a battle it's going to be, he's shown himself to be a viable, quality starting left tackle the last 2 years. He's played every game. He's held down the blind spot just fine. He's not a top left tackle. He's not an all-pro. He's not even a Pro Bowler, but he is a quality starting left tackle in this league, in a league that has not enough of those guys. So what do they do with Rasheed Walker if he goes and has another season like he did the last 2 years? It's really hard for me to see how, when you have three guys on the offensive line paid top 5 at their positions, how you can then go and pay a left tackle potentially top 10 left tackle money, which, if you have a quality left tackle with this ever rising salary cap in the NFL, is probably in line with somewhere that Rasheed Walker is going to land with his extension. So I have a hard time seeing how they're going to fit all of that. The second question, as Spoon referred to, is Elton Jenkins and what needs to be done to placate whatever qualms he has about his contract. Spoon, I've tried to think of past examples over my time, the past decade on the beat, where a player was moved to a less lucrative position on the market and what was done there. And I'm struggling to come up with other examples there. You might have a better feel from your few decades on the beat when that's happened and what has happened as a result. But I don't see a lot of precedent for something like that. And so, the bottom line is that Elton Jenkins was moved to a less lucrative position. It is a position from a football sense that will make this offensive line better. Elton Jenkins is a significant upgrade at center from Josh Myers. The Packers believe that bringing in Aaron Banks means that they're not losing much at left guard. That's why they paid him top 5 left guard money. But from the business side, that's going to be interesting. I think eventually it all works out, but how that works out, we'll have to see.
Let's move forward and let's jump into training camp, which does begin on Wednesday. And obviously we talked so much about so many different storylines, and I even wrote down some of the ones that even personally I'm curious to see. And it's like nothing surprising as far as what Jordan Love, what would his offseason look like heading into another big year as a starter, what the wide receivers will look like, the cornerback room now that it's official that there is no Jair Alexander, and the defensive line. We talked about the health of those guys now that they're going into a healthy offseason. What will the pass rush look like? So we can kind of run through a bunch of different things, and we can really start with you, Spoon. Just what are some things that you're kind of looking to see heading into training camp and just that you're keeping an eye out on?
I think, that's just a lot of obvious things that everybody has talked about, and, seeing how the wide receiver room shakes out. Someone will take a step that maybe wasn't anticipated. Somehow they've got to sort out, what they have. And Matthew Golden's going to be given every opportunity in the world to win a starting job. You don't take a first rounder, number 23, and, put him in a situation where, you want him to be a backup, or you don't want him to be on the field that much. I think we're going to see a ton of him on the field during camp and during the preseason, because I think they want to get him ready to play. So that's an obvious thing. I do think that they're going to make Rasheed Walker work for his job. I think they got to find out whether they have someone better than him. He's been solid, but he's not. He's not Zack Tom. He's not on the verge of being, one of the better left tackles in the NFL. So throw Jordan Morgan out there and find out what you have. I think you also have to find out whether Anthony Belton, where he fits. And what if he ends up fitting best at right tackle? Do you consider moving Zack Tom to left tackle? So I think there's a lot of still some unknowns on the offensive line. And I think that's something to keep an eye on. And of course, cornerback, I think is pretty settled. I think what we're talking about is there somebody who can come in and be a fourth corner? Can someone really kind of emerge and be someone beyond Keyshawn Nixon, Nate Hobbs, and Carrington Valentine? They do need to find fourth and fifth corners. And then you have to figure out, how they're going to use Javon Bullard and Evan Williams and how that shakes out. So those are all things that are worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah.
With Matthew Golden, you especially don't draft the receiver 23rd overall when the reason why you broke this 23-year drought of doing so was because you were in hunt of a number one receiver. It wasn't just sure they felt good about the value and the talent there, but they also, I think Brian Gutekunst came into this offseason knowing that there was a mandate to upgrade the playmaking potential around Jordan Love. It wasn't enough last year. So there's a dearth there of consistency with catching the football, of playmaking. Christian Watson, very unlikely to start the season on the field. There's a dearth of vertical speed and stretching the field. There's a real need there. And they went out and got this guy 23rd overall. So I think Matthew Golden's transition, his entrance into the league, is going to absolutely be something to watch. To me, the two primary themes on each side of the ball is, first and foremost, Jordan Love's continued development. If the Packers are going to take themselves from where they've been, which is a playoff contender, a team that can crack the postseason with a really young roster in the NFC, to a Super Bowl contender, viable title contender, that has to start with Jordan Love. There is room in his game that he has to grow and take another step, another level in this third season as a starter. Does he do that? That to me is a massive piece to all this. On the other side of the ball, it's year two in Jeff Hafley's scheme. Where's the pass rush coming from? Is it like last year where it was a kitchen sink approach where they relied on Jeff Hafley's creativity in this blitz scheme, or were the injuries last year up front to Kenny Clark's toe, to Lucas Van Ness's broken hand, were those really significant reasons that they weren't able to generate much pressure with just 4 dropping 7 into coverage? That pass rush is going to need to be more reliable. It's going to need to be more consistent. I look at that as year two now. Where's that happening?
As a follow-up, Ryan, just it's going back to Matthew Golden and the wide receivers, from what you saw during you could say the light jog, no pads, no contact, OTAs and minicamp, and even just in talking with not only Golden, but, Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Reed, and some of those others, what have been just you could say distance from afar, your impression of just how Matthew Golden is kind of meshing with this group, and just, what did you see even from his workouts?
Well, he's clearly the next Devontae Adams. No, I'm kidding. We have no idea. When we won't even know when he puts on pads. We've got to see him in games and taking live snaps to see what he can even do his rookie year. But what I didn't see was him drop a ball. Every time a ball came to him, it ended in the hands, not on the ground. Now, I didn't see Dontavian Wicks drop many passes during the offseason program either. So even that, I'm not putting much stock into. This is not an answer that we're going to get quickly. It's going to be a longer process of how do you transition to this level, to the speed, to the consistency you've got to be able to do with your hands, with the routes you run, the chemistry with the quarterback. And I think even bigger for any rookie at any position is when those slumps come, because they're going to come. It's not a linear progression for young guys. How do you respond to the adversity? We don't know. We're going to find out, but the Packers absolutely would benefit from Matthew Golden handling that rookie curve as quick as possible.
Spoon, I want to go back and talk a little bit more about the defense. You kind of alluded to some of the things with the corners and just that whole system and just the situation as a whole. I guess we haven't really even talked about, Jair Alexander. We were kind of gone throughout that whole situation with the cornerback room. Who do you kind of see as the guy that really needs to take a bigger step? Is it Keyshawn Nixon? Is it Carrington Valentine? Does Hobbs need to fill a blow? Does a young guy like a Michael Robinson have to be in the mix? What are you looking for with that group?
I'm not sure. Keyshawn Nixon's going to wind up being, I guess what you would call as the number one corner. But I don't think, I think this is sort of a new way to look at their secondary. I think now they're more into the Jeff Hafley philosophy of doing things, which is that you don't necessarily need a number one corner. You need everybody kind of playing the defense together. You don't have to do a lot of matching up, and you're more of a zone concept secondary. So what they need is everybody to stay healthy more than anything. I don't know that Keyshawn Nixon has to do anything different than he did last year. Nate Hobbs just needs to stay healthy. That's been an issue for him. Carrington Valentine, he needs to get better. He needs to tackle better, be more physical, be around the ball a little bit more. And then, I think Javon Bullard's a big part of this as well. And, he's got to continue to develop as a slot, and whether he can cover man-to-man or cover guys coming out of the backfield, things like that. He showed that to some degree, but I think he's a guy they really need to take a big step forward this year. If there was anybody that I point to, I would say it is him, as someone who has to kind of really find his place in their secondary.
I look at the secondary. I think the more maybe important position in terms of maintaining the quality of play is safety. Like, they need Xavier McKinney to have an encore. A big reason that, on paper last year going into the season, you got Jair Alexander on a perimeter, you got Xavier McKinney. You're feeling real good about that combo. The big reason why this secondary did not fall off a cliff when Jair Alexander never returned in the second half of last year, because they had an all-pro safety back there. And having elite safety play helps your cornerbacks, and it certainly helped last year. They need Xavier McKinney to be Xavier McKinney again and do what he did last year. And then they need Evan Williams to not have a sophomore slump. He came in last year as a rookie. He established himself as a guy that can be a quality starter on the back end right away. They need him to be that again, because all of a sudden, if you have that, you have Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams on the back end as your battery there at safety. You can have that flexibility with Javon Bullard, who is probably better suited to be a nickel corner than certainly off what we saw last year than he is on the back end. When Javon Bullard struggled last year as a rookie, he was most often on the back end when he was in deep coverage. So I think that the elite safety play that they had is what really, if they have that again, I think the corners will be fine. If they don't, I wonder if that's when things start to get a little hairy there.
Ryan, are there any other guys maybe on the defense that you're interested in seeing? I guess I'll even say a big guy for me is Lucas Van Ness.
Yep.
You know, what's next for him? He talked about his injury. He said he's been healthy. He talked about how his offseason has been well. Now it's time to produce. You got Rashawn Gary on one end. It's like, you know, what's going to be next for you? What do you take that step? Is there a guy for you like that?
Well, the two guys that they need to have the most significant improvement are the two guys that were not healthy most of last year, which is, as you said, Lucas Van Ness and then Kenny Clark. Right. If you look at Kenny Clark's film last year, he didn't look like Kenny Clark. He didn't have that quick first step that he's always had since he got here. And then we learned during the spring that, yeah, he didn't have a healthy big toe either. And anyone that, you know, one of the things that happened to me this offseason is I got turf toe for the first time. And oh my gosh, let me tell you, I have a newfound appreciation for what it is dealing with turf toe. And I'm a guy that, you know, I'm doing good athletically if I can run 2 miles. All right. This is apples and oranges, but turf toe is not good. And that's not exactly the injury. You know, Kenny Clark's was even worse, but when you don't have a healthy toe, that's tough. And so was that the injury or not? We'll find out. I think, you know, to give you someone not on the defensive front on that defense, in terms of avoiding the sophomore slump, what does Edgerrin Cooper do? Because he couldn't have been much better as a rookie. If he can build on that and really become one of the better off-ball linebackers consistently week in, week out, he's going to get a lot more snaps this year than he did last year. If he can grow with that increased workload, that does a lot, because all of a sudden now you've got Pro Bowl type players on all levels of your defense with Rashawn Gary, Xavier McKinney on the back end, and then you got Edgerrin Cooper in the middle. I think that's a big piece of this defense is what Edgerrin Cooper can do in his second season.
Now, as we start to wrap things up, I do want to briefly touch on special teams, and I'll start with you, Spoon. You know, there's some different things there's elements there, right? McCole Hardman could be in the mix. They cut Alex Hale, so I guess they'll be a little bit thin a kicker right now. Just, you know, is there any other storylines, some things that maybe even on the special teams front that you're curious to see?
You know, maybe just who they trot out for punt returns. I mean, you know that Keyshawn Nixon's going to probably be their kick returner, but, you know, they'll look for other guys since he's going to be playing a ton on defense. You know, special teams in training camp is really which rookies can, you know, shine on there right away. I think we'll keep an eye on Isaiah Simmons. I think he's going to be a guy who could be a difference maker for them on special teams and see what he can add. You know, they got a lot more guys with experience on special teams. They're not reliant as much on just their rookie class, because they had a lot of guys. You know, they have Christian Welch is back now. You know, they just have a ton of guys who have played. Isaiah McDuffie's a good special teams player, and they have some linebackers who can run, and they've got some you know, tight ends and things who are good players to have on special teams. So I think that's just, how does that all shake out? Because that's how a lot of positions will be determined as to who makes the 53.
Ryan, are you excited you won't have to rant about kickers this offseason or this preseason?
Anytime there's enough in this world to rant about, Dominique, anytime we don't have to rant about kickers, that's a win for all of us, I think. So, yes, I am. Are we still in agreement that Keyshawn Nixon is, even if he is de facto CB1, he's still going to be returning the deep kicks?
Well, I don't know why you would take an all-pro guy and not use him there, even if, you know, he was frustrated over what happened last year. But I just can't see taking a proven guy and not using him there.
I completely agree. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I remember coming back from Philly, that last locker room, Keyshawn Nixon saying he wasn't going to return kicks, and thinking, Yeah, that doesn't seem very viable because he's a legitimate weapon there, especially when the weather gets cold, as newsflash, it's been known to in Green Bay. Uh, you like having a weapon any place on the field you can have a weapon, and there's not a lot of places on a lot of teams that have a legitimate weapon at kick return. He's been that since he was implemented at the position midway through 2022. So I get that he's going to have over 800 snaps again. He is important to this defense. They need him to be a good perimeter corner because he was last year, and it was a big deal. I mean, it helped this defense a lot. I just don't see how you take a weapon off the field, and that's what they would be doing if they didn't have Keyshawn Nixon returning kicks.
Yeah, and it seemed like even during this during the OTAs when we talked to him, he did kind of backtrack. He said, I was just a little frustrated at what happened in Philadelphia, and he seems he's going to be on board. So, yeah, we'll just see what makes of the special teams, and even just from the coach, Rich Bisaccia. He kind of said during his interviews, he said he felt like he kind of let down Matt LaFleur at times over these past couple of seasons because of the play of special teams, and we talked about some of those moments. So you have to play complementary football, offense, defense, and special teams. So it really starts training camp just to see how things will start to kind of take shape and really get ready for that first preseason game August 9th in Lambeau Field against the Jets. As we wrap it up, guys, any final words, final thoughts, anything you want to say before we wrap up the podcast?
Let's play ball.
Let's play ball. That's a great way to
just a friendly reminder that it's not really training camp until they strap the pads. So that's when the real football begins. That's when the one-on-one drills begin. That's when they introduce physicality to the game, which is obviously football. So I know that there's going to be a lot of excitement Wednesday, Thursday, this week when there's a football involved and they're running around the field. But pace ourselves. It's going to get real when they put on the pads for the first time.
Yes, and I'll be also taking that advice and pacing myself as well, getting ready for my first full training camp here in Green Bay. So, guys, let's get ready for another season, and we'll see what's to make of 2025 here in Green Bay with the Packers. So we thank you all for checking out the Green 19 podcast. We'll be right back to doing them a lot more regularly as there is more football to dive into. So we thank you for checking this out. I'm Dominique Yates. I'm joined by Tom Silverstein and Ryan Wood.